In today's video I'll be showing you how to make my Zarina Flower Girl wand. She's basically my standard novella rose with 2 leaves and decorated with ribbons and a small foam rose. You can make it in any colour that you choose, anything that will suit your chosen colour scheme, and it doesn't have to be used as a Flower Girl wand either. It could be used as a table decoration or a gift. The ribbons can be trimmed as short or as long as you like. It will withstand a little bit of shaking and scrunching. As you can see, you can pinch the petals in and they just bounce straight back out into shape. So to start with, you'll need a book, and any old book will do for your practice roses, but I wouldn't recommend that you use your favourite book. Go and buy a second-hand one from a charity shop. This book has lots of pictures in. I don't tend to make my roses with lots of pictures, so I tried to choose pages that haven't got too many in them. You'll also need a stem. Now normally I make my roses on these kebab sticks. They're quite thin, but for the Flower Girl ones, so that they can be shaken around a little bit, I tend to use the garden sticks. They're a little less flexible. They're about the same size, they're about 30 centimetres long, and they have a point on one end which you can snip off if you wish. You'll also need some wallpaper paste. Now the link for mixing this up is in the video description. Mine's a little bit gloopy here, it's been a warm few days, so I'll probably add a little bit of extra water to it and give it a good mix. You'll also need some PVA white glue and some high-tack glue. You'll need some florist tape, some regular sewing thread, and some flexible wire. You'll also need my standard template for the leaf shape and the petal shape. The link for this is also in the video description, and if you download it to your computer and then print it off at 100% on A4 paper, it will be exactly the right size. In addition, having a clothes peg and an old tea towel to hand would be useful as well. You'll also need some ribbon. Now I use 3 different types of ribbon for this rose. So yeah, I use an organza ribbon that is 12mm wide, and I also use a basic knit and stitch woven ribbon. This is 2 centimetres wide, and it's got a satin look on one side and a woven look on the other. And then I use a slightly more fancy ribbon. This one is a satin edged organza with a little gold trim through it. So you'll also need some coloured paper for the leaves. You don't need a full sheet of A4 paper unless you're making several of these wands. And you don't have to choose a green leaf, you can choose any colour you like to match your chosen colour scheme. And also you'll need a pair of scissors, I almost forgot. So to start with, you'll need to take 4 pages from your book. Now I'm going to try and look for pages that have got just text on them. There's quite a lot of pictures in this book, so that might not happen. Now I would normally tear out all 4 pages together, but because I'm selecting the pages with just text on them, I'm going to pull them out separately. But this one's quite a cute one with the witches on, so that might make a nice addition to the rose. So take all your 4 pages and make sure they're nicely lined up with each other, and then fold the pages in half. And then simply take your template and line it up with the wording on the page. Now this page has quite a big margin, so I'm going to cut it down a little bit. So it's totally fine to have a little gap at the bottom of the rose petal template, but that bit's going to be bound to the stem anyway, and it will just mean your petals and your actual rose is a few millimeters larger. So yeah, just line up your template to the edge of the words on the page and cut around. If you've seen any of my other flower processes, you'll be well acquainted with this part of the video, and feel free to use the timestamps in the video description to jump around to the part of the video that you'd like to watch. So we're going to cut 3 times from our book page. Each cut will give us 8 petals, and we only need 21 for the rose, but as always, it's always good to have spares. So lay out your petals in front of you. I like to lay mine out in 3 rows of 6 petals with 2 extra to the right hand side and all the spares to the left. It's just the way I've developed my processes over the years, and it's just habit. Now this petal I'm going to switch out because it's got a little pair of feet on it. And these ones with the witches on, because this is the Worst Witch book, I'm going to put them as the last 2 petals to put on the rose so that the little witches can be seen on the underside of the rose. So sometimes when we cut our petals, they don't quite cut properly, and it's very easy just to trim them up afterwards. We might not need these petals, but just in case we do, I'll trim them anyway. So once all our petals are lined up, so we'll take one of our spares from the spares pile, and what we want to do is, with our finger and thumb at the centre top of the petal, we want to roll down the petal from the top to the middle, and what we're trying to achieve is a little cone shape with a nice closed point at the top and a little opening at the bottom. And then we'll take a dollop of wallpaper paste, a good dollop, and put it inside the cone shape. And then with the pointed end of the garden stick, we'll push that into the cone shape, and we want to push it up so that the point is just underneath the middle. And then pinch it in at the bottom. And then simply take your thread and wind it around the petal several times, making sure that you catch over the thread, the loose thread that's hanging down. And just keep winding the thread as tightly as you can all the way down until it reaches the stem. So we want to be just past the petal. Now we want to pop a little bit of wallpaper paste on each of the petals in front of us. So I would normally put the wallpaper paste on at about 2 centimeters from the bottom and just drag a blob down the petal. It doesn't matter if they're thick and gloopy blobs, it will all help make the rose more secure at the end. So pick up your stem and the first petal from the first row in front of us, and we want to align this petal so that the bottom of the new petal aligns with the bottom of the petal on the stem. And then pinch the bottom of the petal and then wind your thread around to hold that in place. Then pick up the next petal from the bottom row and we want to place it directly opposite. Pinch at the bottom and then take your thread and wind it around several times to secure it in place. So for the next petal, what we want to do is we want to align it so that the middle of the new petal aligns with the very edge of the previous petal. Now we want to make sure that the bottom of the petals are all aligning nicely. So for all of the rest of the petals in front of us, we want to follow exactly the same process. We want to align the middle of the new petal with the very edge of the previous petal. Make sure you twist the thread around 2 or 3 times in between placement of the petals. I post a new tutorial every Sunday, so if you don't want to miss out on future tutorials, then do hit subscribe, and then when you next jump onto YouTube, you'll be able to find them very easily. So as you come to the very last petal, add it in the usual way and pull the thread really tight and wind it a few extra times around the underside of the petals, and then twirl the rose stem around in your fingertips and tightly bring down the thread so that it comes onto the stem again. Bring it down about 1 centimetre or so underneath the bunchy bit of the petals, and then simply snip off the thread, and with a dollop of wallpaper paste just catch the loose thread, and that will hold it in place. And it won't unravel if you just paste it on in the same direction as the thread is wound. So the rose is looking a little bit sorry for itself at the moment, and what we want to do is just with our fingertips gently push out the petals. At this stage you can pull the petals back up and push them back down until you've got a really nice little rose shape. If you find you've got any gaps, then you can very simply take one of your spare petals and just fill in the gap. So once you're happy, then put the rose to one side to dry. I normally leave them overnight and pick them up the next day, but you don't want to move on to the next stage until all of the wallpaper paste is properly dry. So we'll make the leaves now, and you simply want to take your coloured paper and your leaf template and fold the paper so that your leaf template fits nicely on it. Cut the paper along the edge and then align your leaf template to the very edge of the paper and cut around. What we want to have are two leaf shapes that are exactly the same size. I'll trim that up at the bottom a little bit because the fold wasn't perfect. Keep them in their pairs and make sure that you cut twice from the paper so that you've got 4 leaf shapes. So keeping the leaves in their pairs, I pop them on the front of the book just to protect the work surfaces. It's getting a bit grubby already, but this just helps prevent any glue spillage. So take your wire, and what we want to do is cut off maybe about 24 centimetres. It can be a few centimetres either way. I generally normally do it by eye because I've been trimming these for years. Now take your high-tack glue, and what we want to do is put some high-tack glue on the 2 bottom leaves. Now what I normally do is run it around the edge of the leaf and then straight up the middle. Then take your wire and place it so that it is about 1.5 centimetres from the top of the leaf shape. Take the matching pair and press it down firmly on top of the wire. So what you want to do now is take a tea towel and hold the leaf shape very firmly at the bottom, pinching the wire as tight as you can, and then press down firmly all around your leaf shape with the tea towel. And you'll see you get a little imprint of the wire through the paper, and the high-tack glue will hold all the edges of the leaf very firmly together now. And do the same on the other end of the wire. Remember to hold the leaf very firmly at the bottom, otherwise you'll pull it off the wire because it's not properly dried. So what I like to do next is to cut a few little notches in the leaves, but first of all I'll check them over and I might fine tune any of the edges, and then to put the notches in I simply put 2 little cuts at slightly different angles 3 or 4 times along the edge of the leaf shape. Sometimes I can fit 4 in, it depends on how low down I've put the first cut, and this is totally random. I don't have a template for putting the notches in. So what I'll do at this stage is I will bring the wire together and put a little bit of glue about 1 centimetre or 1.5 centimetres from the bottom of the leaf shape. They don't have to line up perfectly together. And then I'll take my florist tape and just bind the wire together. And I'll roll the florist tape down maybe about 5 centimetres, maybe 6. Put a little bit of glue just to secure the florist tape in place. And we'll put those to one side for when the rose is dry. So once the rose is dry, you'll see that you can happily squeeze it all together and nothing moves and it will bounce straight back into place. So take your florist tape and simply wind it around the bunchy bit on the underside of the rose, and when you get to about 3 centimeters under the rose, take your leaves and bend them away from you and simply attach them to the stem using the florist tape. We'll do 1 or 2 turns of the florist tape, and what we want to do is check that the leaves are pointing out nicely from the edge of the rose. So continue winding the florist tape all the way down to the bottom of the stem. And when you get to the very bottom, what you want to do is make sure that the stem is fully covered and fold the florist tape down and then twist it back round on itself. And then about 2 or 3 centimeters up the stem, cut off the florist tape, add some glue and simply so keeping your organza on its reel, take your organza ribbon and place it diagonally about 1 centimeter from the bottom of the stem. Turn the stem and wind the ribbon around so that it catches over the loose bit of ribbon, and then wind it up the stem. So you'll see the organza gives a little spiral look to it where it overlaps, and that's why I like using the organza for the ribbon on the stems. It's also easier to wind up the stem, and I think it makes it a little bit more decorative as well. So once you get to the part where the stems start protruding from the stem, simply snip off the organza ribbon, add a little bit of glue, roll the ribbon around, and then taking your clothes peg, just hold the ribbon in place. So now what we want to do is cut our decorative ribbons, and I will normally cut about 1 meter, but you can have the ribbons as long or as short as you like, and you can even add extra ribbons. And trim the fancy ribbon to the same length. And then taking the fancy ribbon, we want to tie it around the stem in a loose knot, and then slide the loose knot up towards the clothes peg. If you've used the high-tack glue, the clothes peg should have held the ribbon in place, but you can also use your fingertip just to make sure it doesn't unravel. And simply tighten the knot. And then with the thicker ribbon, again, we just want to tie a single knot. We don't need a double knot because we'll be adding some glue shortly. And pull it tight just above the fancy ribbon. And then the last thing to do is to get the little foam rose. So put a dab of glue on the knots of both the ribbons, and then take your little foam rose and just cover the knots. And then what I'll usually do is just check where the rose needs a little bit of extra glue, and then I'll put it to one side, lay it on the table until the high-tack glue has dried. So yeah, that is my Zarina Flower Girl wand, and do remember not to give it to small children or babies, as there are loose flowing ribbons, and if the leaves manage to get pulled off the wire, then there would be loose wire and the foam rose could be pulled off with a tough hand. So yeah, don't give them to very small children. So I hope you've enjoyed this video, and do hit like if you have, because it always puts a smile on my face. And if you'd like to see more tutorials in the future, do remember to subscribe.